development that we've had. It's been an exciting 3 days, and I'm very excited to kind of finish with this session for the opportunity of all our participants to have a chance to kind of hear a little bit more about potential career opportunities as they kind of grow and develop in this creative industry. So with that being said, I'd like to have a warm welcome. We have 4 panelists with us here today, and they'll have an opportunity to introduce themselves to all of you. But for those who don't know, we also have Jay Baker, who's here to kind of facilitate the conversation. Before we get started, I am going to open up that if you have any questions for our panelists, if you want to put them in the chat near the end of our kind of conversation today in the last 15 to 10 minutes, Jay will kind of take a look at those questions and filter them through. But we do have some questions that we'd like to start sharing with our panelists on our side. But if you do have any that come up, please feel free to share them in the chat, okay? All right, and with that, Jay, I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Amazing. So welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be having the live chat as well going. So again, as things come up, feel free to throw things in there. I have set questions, but you never know. I might find that your questions are better than mine. So don't be afraid to join in and participate. So yeah, like Jess said, I'm Jay. I've been working on the projects with Adobe for the last 5 or 6 years. So I've been here for a while. I am not necessarily a creative, though I do enjoy and consume these things. So I'm really excited to be talking to you all today. Before we get started, I would love to just go around and have you each introduce yourself, your name, pronouns, where you're joining us from, and a little bit about what you do and what your aspirations are. I know it's a lot, but I think that you can handle it. Who would like to start? And if not, I'll pick you, don't worry.
I'll go ahead. So my name is Jimmy Blatt, and I'm a member of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation. I'm currently in Montreal, or Junjage. My pronouns are he, him. And I am primarily an actor. I work as an actor on stage and in film and television, and I've been doing that since 2005. And my aspirations are to continue a new branch of my career, which I recently started, which is writing, mostly playwriting, but I have done some writing for short film and in talks with some people to start development for television.
Thank you. Welcome. Michael, you're next on my screen, so I'm going to pick you.
No problem. My name is Michael Ovell. My pronouns are he, him. I started in front of the camera on acting television, and I've since migrated to post-production production. I do lots of short documentary, and my aspiration is to extend that, and I want to do feature-length documentaries. Yeah. Thank you.
Melissa, you're next.
Oh, amazing. So my name is Melissa Jim. I was born and raised in a First Nation community in Saskatchewan called Witchican Lake First Nation. I'm currently with Big Soul Productions, which is one of the largest Indigenous-owned film and production companies in Canada. And I've been with them for about 8 years now. And, oh, sorry, I forgot to, my pronouns, she, her. And some of my aspirations are to actually look into developing and making my own project ideas that I have, which is very new.
Amazing. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit about what that looks like in a bit. Awesome. Jamie? No, but you're muted, I think.
Hello.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
I'm outside in my backyard because I live with roommates and everyone. So somebody is learning how to tattoo with a tattoo gun inside, and then somebody else is like taking an exam, and we're all sitting at the same table. So I was like, I'll just go outside. All right. So I am currently in Toronto. I was born in Sand River First Nation in Treaty Number 3 territory, which is near Thunder Bay. I'm Anishinaabe, and I'm a filmmaker. I do some, I guess, illustration and painting and some performance-based stuff. So music, I have a band, and I work as a coordinator at Imaginative, which is the largest Indigenous film and media festival. And I work on the programming team.
So lots and lots. And I'm really excited to see that we have sort of a very diverse group of folks with us today to give us some insight into the multiple arrays of things that young folks can be doing in the film industry. And so we talked a little bit about your aspirations, but I would like to go a little bit back and ask you what inspired you to join the film industry, to become a part of the film industry in the first place? And maybe Jimmy, we'll go back to you.
Originally, when I started school, I didn't think I'd be doing this for a living. I originally started in English literature and communications, but underneath all of that, I kind of knew that I really wanted to act. And I enjoyed acting when I did do it in school, when I was taking classes in high school and then later on in college. I figured I was kind of lying to myself that I didn't want to act. So I made the switch over and I went to theater school. And I think the biggest reason why I wanted to become an actor was, well, one of them was that I loved the energy I got when I performed and I was getting something back from an audience. But two, I love to tell stories. And even in high school, you know, me and a bunch of friends, we would create short films and on our own time. It had nothing to do with school. We just were creative that way. And I really loved being in front of the camera and helping to tell that story. So that was really the spark for me. And then, you know, the fire grew as the years went on. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to share how they got started or what inspired them to get started?
I guess I can go. I was actually inspired a lot through my father. Growing up, I would always watch movies with him. And this was like DVD days, VHS days. And sometimes they always had like the special bonus feature content. And that was really the stuff that I loved watching, was actually seeing all the work that was put into putting one scene together. And it just fascinated me, and I wanted to learn more about how that industry kind of works. So I actually went to college for media arts production, which is more technical. And it was more to like operate a camera, shoot your own content, edit it, do sound, everything. So that was the career path I originally started off in. And then it kind of changed as I made the transition from Saskatchewan to Toronto, and ended up getting an amazing opportunity to work with Big Soul. And it was more to do with office admin / coordination work. Which is kind of what led to my current career in the industry, which is a production coordinator. And I also do a lot of clearances for all the productions that we do. So yeah, I think I really have to thank my dad for putting me on this path, because he was always that person that was there for me as well. Yeah, so if it wasn't for watching movies with my dad, I don't think I would necessarily be here right now.
Amazing. Mike, you look like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, and very similar. My father also is a big movie buff. So I have a family that would get together, and movies were this really big occasion. Movies were almost how my family communicated with each other. And now in retrospect, looking back, I realized the content of that communication was very moralistic. It was, how does this movie contribute to the conversation that we're having now? How does this movie impact, how will it impact the lives of people, society, and how will this storytelling help to change things for the better. And we were always analyzing film through that lens. So I kind of, in a weird way, have maybe this equation where filmmaking or storytelling is how I can inject my own personal moral view, or to maybe lift up somebody else's personal moral views. Yeah.
My dad is a production manager on a TV show here in Toronto, and I must say that I also have a similar relationship with film through my dad, and that was the majority of the time how we communicated as well. So that really resonates for me too. Jamie, did you want to jump in? It looks like we have you back now.
Hello, sorry about that. It's inspiration.
Yes.
I think I just grew up watching a lot of weird movies, and I also was very disappointed with how Indigenous people were portrayed, or have been in the history of film. So a huge part of my wanting to be a filmmaker has been to to try to learn how to talk about identity, and to explore, gender, sexuality, all of these things that are linked to identity. I guess in my own way, like I don't know, I just thought that maybe film or video is just more accessible to transmit ideas, and it's easily consumed. So yeah, that's why I was inspired.
Yeah, I've been doing Q&As with some of the young creatives that Taking It Global is currently working with. And that seems to be the feeling around why people start in film to begin with, is that storytelling aspect. And videos and film seem to be so well received, and really are able to connect viewers to be able to tell that story. And so that's something that I've been hearing quite a bit lately. I'm wondering, and some of you spoke to this a little bit, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of the young creatives that we work with is that they don't really know where to start in their career path. There are so many different options. They're doing after-school programs and trying a bunch of different things, all of which they may love. And so one of the questions I have is, how did you get started? How did you choose the path that you took today? And maybe it's different than when you started, but what was that first step like? How did you decide? Mike, I see you nodding a little bit, so I'm just going to see you because
I'm aggressively nodding. I love that question. Okay, so I grew up in a neighborhood that I think I was really fortunate, because I grew up in downtown Toronto, right around the corner from the Lift Co-op, which is the Liaison of Independent Filmmakers of Toronto, which, if anybody out there wants to take a look at their, I guess, local community to find a resource like that, I would highly encourage that, because it was really my parents who said, you're making all of these little movies all the time on your little camcorder, that I begged them for over Christmas, right? And I was not hiring because that would involve money, but getting my siblings and my cousins involved in the process. And they said, why don't you go down the street and just walk into this place we heard about it? It's a co-op, it's for filmmakers. So I did. I was this precocious, 14, 15-year-old kid, and I walked in and was like, I want to make movies. They're like, okay, great. Well, you've come to the right place. And luckily, being that type of co-op environment, it was very welcoming to new filmmakers, and it's entirely oriented around getting people into the very beginning stages of the filmmaking career. They offer courses, classes by professionals in the industry. They have equipment that you can rent. If you become a member for a very small fee, you have access to editing suites and things like that. So I just took a whole bunch of classes. I took like a Super 8 class and a 16 millimeter. This is back in the day of film, right? And digital editing had just become a thing, and everybody was like, wow, my mind is completely blown. And so I got in there and I fell in love with the technical aspect of it. I fell in love with the intrepidness of all of my peers who were also new and coming to the industry. And that's kind of where I learned that I really think that developing the relationships early on, those relationships that you make early on, the people that you connect with in the beginning through a local hub like that, those you can carry through your life. And as you grow as filmmakers, you end up kind of weaving in and out of other people's stories and helping people with their things, and they help you with your things, and you kind of build this thing together. And so that would be my recommendation.
And it's cool that you got to have that experience at such a young age, and was pushed and supported in that way. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and again, was very lucky. And so I think that if there are hubs like that I know of in other places in the world. So and also now there are digital hubs where the same spirit is being utilized. So I would just encourage you to look for your people, look for your community of upcoming filmmakers and wannabe filmmakers.
Melissa, you're next on my screen. How did you choose your career path?
I think the challenge of, a lot of people from my very small community in Saskatchewan, I think it was just challenging myself to do something that a lot of people didn't necessarily know that they could actually pursue, which is, a job in the entertainment TV industry. Like the arts in my community is like pretty much non-existent. So just it was the eagerness of wanting to learn more about the industry, which is why I pursued college, and then falling in love with the technical aspects, like Michael was saying. Like I grew up with a camcorder myself, and would like write these little scripts out for all my cousins to act in, and like I've always had that passion. But to actually pursue it was scary. But also just from learning, I fell in love with the process. But this was also digital editing was so new. We still had to shoot on mini DV tapes and capture it. And I can't tell you how many times I had a time code break. It was like so frustrating. But I stuck through everything, and I just loved the people that I surrounded myself with, the instructors, my classmates, and then making the big move to go from the prairies to come to Toronto, and that was really that was a scary move because I didn't know anyone here. So I did what everyone would do. Like they would go, to all these film and media businesses, and I would, hand in my resume, and I would just see it going into, the top drawer of the receptionist or office admin, and I'm like, that's pretty much where it's gonna stay, But I got lucky. I went through the Missouri Aboriginal Employment Agency, and they really kind of set that, I guess, meeting up for me for a job opening with Big Soul Productions, like 8.5 years ago. And, I did the interview in person, which was terrifying. And it was for a role that I actually didn't even go to school for, which was office admin work. And they saw that I had the experience and gave me a chance. And then eventually I just kept moving up the ladder within the company. So I went from being an office admin to doing marketing and communication work, production coordinating work, clearance work, producing some of the videos for corporate clients. So yeah, it's just, for me, I've been fortunate enough to have that opening, which I know is very hard for a lot of people. But yeah, and I'm so grateful to be able to be with them to this day. But yeah, for me, what decided that career path, I think coordination was just kind of like a hidden talent I didn't know I had, because everything I was doing prior to that was more technical.
Right.
But yeah, I had an act for it, and I love doing it, which is hard work that not everyone, appreciates. You're pretty much working nonstop all the time. But I oddly enough love it. I yeah, can't get enough of it. The better.
So happy to hear that. And it seems like between you and Mike that there is a part of just sort of like taking a chance and being open to opportunities to try new things, and that seems to be one of the ways of finding that community, like you're talking about, of people that are supportive and are doing similar things or give you the opportunity to do similar things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I found my community.
Jimmy?
For me, I kind of found myself in a spot where I really didn't have much to lose. I come from really humble beginnings, so all the stereotypes around a struggling actor really didn't scare me that much. I mean, there wasn't there was kind of no way I could have less money than I already had. So for me, that risk was an easy one to take. And then when it comes to being an actor, there's a couple of routes you can take to try to find your career path. Mine was through school, through theater school, and then eventually you get to the point when it's time to find an agent, and that makes it a lot easier for you once you're able to obtain that. But I went back and forth. Some years I acted more than I did other things, and some years I did other things more than I acted. I spent 2 years in marketing and communications after I graduated theater school, because at that point I decided I wanted a little bit more money. And but eventually, if you realize that that's what you really want to do when it comes to acting, you're going to find yourself going back to it more often than not. And eventually it's about taking that leap, and an agent is a big step in that. Agent helps you, it gets you in the room for film and television, and if you have the training behind you, or if you have the chops, then the rest is up to you. Yeah, so that was really how I made what I consider a pretty easy choice. A hard battle once you're there sometimes, but I think it's about perseverance, and it's about your true desire to want to do it. Yeah. Short and sweet. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you say is perfect. Jamie, did you want to share?
Sure. The question is, how did I decide on this career path? Yeah, so I actually started this is my second career. So I had a first career in social work and policy. And so I was working on children and youth issues, like Indigenous children and youth issues, and kind of like doing neat things like cultural revitalization, reclamation activities, children's mental health and wellness, and all of these things. And I started taking, after work, I would go and take courses at George Brown, just down the street from my workplace. And I found that in the 5 years that I was working in policy, my after work activities were just art-based. So there's painting, illustration, and then I found filmmaking and screenwriting, and I was like, I think I belong here. I think like this excites me and like breathes like life into me. And when you're working with very challenging like social political issues, it's very exhausting work. And so it's always good to have kind of like that balance. And I thought that maybe I could reach more people, making films. And so, yeah, I found all of the places to educate myself. Now I'm in my master's program, MFA at York University, doing film production. And because I had these administrative skills, I just kind of transferred what I had, like what I had in my resume. So I'm good at organizing, I'm good at critical thinking, and I'm good at writing, and I can get money. And so I was like, what kind of jobs can I get in kind of the arts? What kind of jobs could I do in film where I already have these skills? So writing, producing, very capable of finding money. So like these are things that I think are essential when you start out. You kind of start recognizing that, oh, this is how my brain works, and like these are the skill sets that I have. And now I'm doing kind of like my part-time and freelance work is all kind of like administrative based, and grant writing is a huge part of it.
Definitely. I think what I love about all of these answers is that there are sort of a variety of ways that you've ended up where you are. And I think it highlights, you know, the idea that it can be something that you're super passionate about. It could be around issues that you're super passionate about. You might even just want to think about what skills am I good at that I can sort of harness and start looking deeper at and developing more. And so it's nice to know that there are a variety of ways that you can start entering into this industry. One of the other questions that I have, and I love this group for this because you've been doing it for some time, is how has film changed since you started, or evolved since you started, and what do you think it looks like in the future?
I could say, as an actor, there are a lot more roles for Indigenous people than there were 10 years ago. I remember my agent at the time called me up one day, and she didn't even, her question was, what'd she say? You're Indian, right? And I said, what? And she said, you're Indian, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh, there's this company, they're looking for an actor, but you know, we can't do it like we used to. We can't just hire an Italian guy anymore. And I said, okay, cool. But this, you know, this is a while ago, and I'm with a new agent now. But I guess, you know, that's from my perspective anyway. That's one of the biggest changes, is that not only are there are more roles for Indigenous people, but there are more stories being told by Indigenous people. And that just feeds into it. And I think the more exposure we get in terms of our stories being told, the greater the understanding, and I think it just snowballs from there. So, you know, it's not perfect right now, but it's definitely better than it used to be, and I think we're on the right path. I really do. We're seeing less and less non-Indigenous people telling Indigenous stories, which to me is very important. And I think that if that solidifies itself as a must, then we're in good shape as actors moving forward.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. I was going to say that, that you see more Indigenous people telling their own stories, for sure. Beautifully put.
Amazing. May?
Yeah, I was gonna just touch a little bit on that. The emergence of different voices is going to become, I think, is going to be wider and more broad in the future and more open. And the obvious thing to talk about also is the technology. So like technology is changing every industry at such a rapid pace right now, and I think if you're a techno geek like I am, like that's really fun. You're just gonna like, yay, strap myself to that roller coaster. So yeah, I would just encourage everybody to to sort of think of themselves as an industry that really prides itself on being on the cutting edge in terms of technology, and yeah, see what's coming in the future. I know I mean, one thing I'm super excited about is cameras where you can actually adjust the aperture in post, right? So you can decide what depth of field you want in post. Like that's my mind. So yeah, there's lots of crazy stuff in the future going to happen.
I'm gonna have to do some research on that. Jamie, I know that you're. Oh yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry, I was just going to quickly add that I do a lot of clearance work. So basically, I've seen an increase of just Canadian law being a lot more stricter, especially with what you can have on screen. It's different. I've worked on both sets where you've had a control set with a production designer. You don't necessarily have to worry about props and stuff because it comes from a prop house. Your talents is wearing wardrobe from your wardrobe stylist. But I've also done documentary where you don't necessarily have control of your setting, and there's just so many little things that can get passed on camera that make your final edit, and you have to seek clearance for that, you know, and either to get permission to show it in your project. So I've been doing a lot of that work lately, and it just, yeah, it's insane.
I can imagine.
More red tape coming.
Yes, more gaff tape. Please bring the gaff tape.
Definitely not something I would have known or thought of. So thank you. And Jamie, I know that you're a little bit newer to the industry, but I'm curious around, you know, what you've even seen in the time that you've been doing it.
Yeah, so I think that my perspective is more around kind of like what's happening with like funding structures, just because like I have a background in how the funding structures in Canada work, and the work that I do at Imaginative, we are looking more at like ethics and responsibility when it comes to filmmaking and how our sets run, and working with traditional knowledge in First Nations communities and how to represent First Nations, Inuit and Métis on the screen. And so these are more kind of like ethical questions, and putting them into practice, doing kind of like studies and research around that, and also the nature of consultation. I think a lot of production companies think that they can just hire a Native person and that makes their content Indigenous, or you know, they can tell stories. And so like really looking at questions like whose story is it, and kind of like building in that reflexivity around kind of the location of the speaker. So like those things are really interesting shifts that I've seen in the last 3 years of doing kind of like more of the film, like I wouldn't say policy, but I do get dragged into like these bigger like funding conversations for the arts. And I don't know why, but I'm always just there randomly. But it's nice to know kind of like how these things work and how they're shifting. And yeah, the idea of consultation, of inviting different Indigenous peoples into the room to talk about our needs as artists and filmmakers, that's new. And I don't think that has been done until the last few years. So I'm excited for the future.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important conversation to have, especially because a lot of the young creatives in our network are working, you know, in social impact and are putting together documentaries and are doing interviews and trying to have these very poignant and difficult conversations. And so strategies around how do we be more inclusive, how do we actually tell stories from the people that are experiencing them versus trying to take them and tell those stories, you know, apart from the communities and the individuals that are impacted by these very real issues, is a very important conversation to have. So I hope that, you know, as you all, as young creatives, continue to do this work, that you're keeping these things in mind and that you're really reflecting on whose story is being told and how am I telling it. Which brings me, I guess, to my next question, which, you know, as the industry changes and moves, what do you think are some must-have skills for young people that are entering the industry or are, you know, new to the industry? What do they need to know, or what skills should they have?
It's a tough one when it comes to acting, because there's kind of two there's kind of two paths you can take. One includes training, and one doesn't. And I know some phenomenal actors that have never gone to theater school or acting school, and they've made a career out of it. And I know some actors that have gone to theater school and are now doing other things. So, I would say training, but I think more importantly, it's kind of in the doing of it. So you end up learning by actually doing it. And as a young actor, the easiest way to do that is just participate in student films as often as you can. You know, and you're not going to get paid immediately, but what you are going to do is you're going to gain experience in front of a camera. You're going to start to know the lingo. You're going to get to know who does what on set, which is very useful and helpful because if you start doing it seriously, there's an expectation on you as an actor to understand all of that already. And if you get to a bigger set where there's 30 or 40 people moving around you at all times, it can be really overwhelming. And so your knowledge of what is going on is kind of what's going to ground you in it all, and just help you settle into what's important, which is doing your job. So I would say, getting the student film stuff in, getting some experience, and at the same time, if you can find classes, I would recommend it. It might not necessarily have to be theater school, but I always recommend, if you can, theater school, but other film classes exist. And I would highly recommend trying to find one that's close to you. And in doing that, you're not only gaining experience, you're gathering material for your demo reel, which is essential in getting an agent. And you're also getting to know people. So going back to what Melissa and Michael were saying, finding your people is really important as an actor as well. Just involving yourself in the community. Yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, that's a lot of advice. So thank you.
Yeah.
And Jamie, I've been coming to you last, so I'm going to come to you next if you're okay with that.
Okay, so the question was skills.
Yeah, what skills do people need to be in your part of the industry?
So I think that, so I did do some directing, but I recently have gotten into solo experimental filmmaking. If you are more into looking into get into kind of like gallery spaces or like video art and that kind of stuff, I don't know. There's like lots of different things. So I guess I'll just talk about communication. I think across like any sort of role that you have it's the most important thing is to be able to clearly communicate your ideas to somebody else, because if you think about the whole system, like the set, it's just one idea that's being communicated through the entire production. So, being able to articulate your thoughts and also to understand kind of the nature of the work that you're undertaking, your role, your responsibility on set. And yeah, I think just, kind of also calming down too, because people make mistakes, and kind of becoming a more accepting person of, other people's mistakes as well, but being able to communicate calmly around any issue that arises, I think is very important. I've seen directors who are just so frazzled on set and they're just kind of screaming at people or like running around. And I like to do things with grace, and I think that's really important because it makes you a very lovely person to be around and like to work for. So I think it's really important to have good communication skills, and it just makes everything go smooth. So yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like that would be important because obviously a few of you have talked about the necessity, or at least the benefit to community. And I imagine that if you're not good at communicating and you're tough to work with, that will sort of spread around. So that makes sense for sure.
Totally. I think reputation is important, and you are responsible for your reputation when you start working with other creatives. So I don't know.
Half the battle for me. I mean, I'm sure at times in my career, people have considered hiring me or somebody else. And I'd like to think that because I am the way I am in a rehearsal hall or on set, people have decided to go with me. Not necessarily because I'm a better actor, but because it just maybe a little bit more pleasant, hopefully.
Like actually like to work with you in that sense. Melissa, did you want to share some must-have skills for your part of the industry?
Sure. With my current career as production coordinator, it kind of just happened. I had mentioned, I never really went to school for it, so I was grateful enough to have two really great mentors that taught me what they knew, which was of being in the industry for 25 years. And I kind of had mentors in all aspects. One was creative, as a creative producer, one was as a technical producer, and one was business affairs producer. So I kind of have the knowledge from those three producers with me. But I think with coordinating, I think some of the skills that you need to have is obviously strong communication skills, because you're constantly communicating with everyone. You're kind of like the hub of making everything happen on the day when you go to camera. So that prep work is so important. And yeah, and then just the determination to work through those hard times when it gets stressful, and those really long nights, and then waking up early to do it all again the next day. It takes so much work, and you obviously lose like a lack of sleep, but in the end, when you see the finished product, you're just like, oh my gosh, that was worth everything. But yeah, and then just being organized, and also just respectful of the people who you're communicating with. That's something that I've learned, and do to this day.
And Mike.
I think everybody said everything.
I know.
Everybody's answer was amazing, and it was very. There's one other thing that I was just thinking in the back of my head that I would love to put on the pile. On top of communication skills, I would put also interpretation skills, because, like Jamie mentioned, that very often it's one vision, that is trying to collectively be realized by a group of people, from the director down to the craft services or the production design, or there is no job too small really on a film set, and everything has to come together like in beautiful harmonious concert to recognize this vision. And so I think that even if your job for a film is to like make widgets all day long, you still need to figure out how you can interpret the vision in your own way to make it as good as it can be, as spectacular as it can be. So that would be what I would add.
Amazing. Not something I would have thought of, but also probably relevant for everyone's lives.
Also, and you're going to make so many mistakes. It's like, don't take those mistakes to heart, like you learn from them as well. If anything, if I could tell my younger self, like, don't take yourself too seriously and just have fun with it, I think emotionally maybe I would have been a lot better at handling things.
Oh my gosh, I still make so many mistakes.
I know.
I am so embarrassed. I didn't put time code on at client exports for notes like last week. So it happened.
Yeah.
Melissa, you brought something up that I've heard quite a bit about the industry, which is that it's really intensive. It can be overwhelming and draining. And I'm curious, if you all could share a little bit about, how you take care of yourself, or how do you set your boundaries to know, I need to be up all night to finish this thing, or no, I need to take a step back and take care of myself first. How do you balance those things?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I think I'm still trying to learn the balance of that. As I get older, I am realizing that I'm putting myself first, which is probably, I would say, the most important part. But also at the same time, I'm kind of in a position where I'm like, there's a lot of people that are waiting on certain tasks to be completed on my end. So that's, I think, what pushes me to work harder and work in those long nights. And it kind of actually just becomes routine and you get used to it after a while. And as I had mentioned, like I've always made mistakes and I've always taken it to heart. But as you work in the industry longer and longer and longer, you build that tough skin, and it doesn't become as hurtful or stressful anymore. And you really do learn from your mistakes, you know. I think what I need to incorporate more is I do a lot of my work in front of a laptop or a computer. So just incorporating more movement in my day. So that's what I'm trying to improve on as of right now.
Me too, actually. Any other strategies for balancing life in the industry?
Yeah. Because the industry kind of it works. It's like a bit like the theater, or like the circus or something like that. You know, there's this time when the production is going full tilt, and then there's this looming sort of, I might be unemployed for 4 months after that. And when I was younger, I would immediately be freaking out and trying to fill that next, what's coming next. You never build vacation time in that way because you're so worried about how am I going to pay rent. It is so crucial to schedule your time off and protect it like at all costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I need to take that note.
We're going to have to talk about that.
Jimmy or Jane?
I would say, luckily, as actors, we have a union that protects us on set anyway, and by providing guidelines. But there are productions that like to push those boundaries, and I think the only true fail-safe for that is to know yourself and know what you're comfortable with, and to understand that it's okay to take a step back once in a while. It's okay to say, you know, I'm tired. I don't think I could. I don't think I can make this tackle on this particular take right now. Can I get a little break? Or, you know, it's a bit cold. Can I get a sweater or something like that? I mean, you know, on good productions, that'll all be taken care of for you. But when you're first starting off, it's important that you kind of are your own union in many ways. So it's okay to say that you're not comfortable with what you're doing. I think that's important to know.
I think that's really good to hear, especially for people that are just starting out, because I think in any career, there's always this fear of saying no. And so you're constantly taking on tasks and projects just to prove yourself and kind of totally neglecting your wellness. So even I am like, yeah, it's okay. I can take a break. So thank you for that. I think that's sound advice. And Jamie?
I am the wrong person to ask about balance. I'm like, because I'm like, I don't know. This is like going on my 4th year of trying to build a career in filmmaking. I've just been doing like so much. My days are so long. I barely get any time off because I'm just like, wow. And so I'm just finishing up like a 73-day work period. Today is the last day. And I'm going to have a week off, which is exciting. But how I got through it all is, having really strict habits. So, you know, going to bed at the same time every night, exercising every day, eating healthy, just like finding moments to like meditate and all this kind of stuff to kind of keep your body and your mind in check. Like, I think that's how I get through the big work stints. And I do agree with Mike that you need to schedule time off. So even though I do have like these long work stints, I will take a month off, you know, an entire month off to just do whatever I need to do to kind of revive myself from an intense work period.
think that's really helpful because, you know, there are situations where you can't say no and the work has to get done. So thinking about strategies that you can use for yourself to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, even if you're pushing yourself a little bit, I think is going to be really helpful. So meditation, yoga, stretching even. I've been stretching lately and it has been a game changer. Who knew? But I take at least 20 minutes to stretch every day and it's really been so helpful. So thank you for the reminder. So we're getting close to the time of wrapping up and I have one more question, but I see a few questions in the chat. So before I move to the chat, I just wanted to ask if there's one resource and or next step that you'd recommend for digging deeper into your part of the industry for folks that are watching. Yeah.
First this time. I think that before, I mean, education is definitely important. Trying things, you know, not being afraid to try. But was what I think if you're wanting to take the leap is to be in control of your finances and to have a safety net built for yourself before you start taking on any sort of freelance work or in your first few years as an artist, because people will want to pay you less than what you're worth and expect you to do free labor. So it's nice to have yourself a little bit of cushion, maybe like 3 months worth of expenses saved up or anything that's just going to help you get through those times where you're not going to have any money, because it's nice to fall back on those things.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Nice.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mentioned finding some sort of film co-op, even if that means you have to find it online, because I know they exist now. And if you're looking for just the technical know-how, I mean, the internet is an incredible thing. There's nofilmschool.com. There's lynda.com, where I think they do like a library card. A lot of libraries internationally have subscriptions. You can just punch in your card and you get free access to those courses. Or if you're really bougie, you want to take a master class course. I did a master class documentary course, which was like incredible. Yeah, so that's just for technical stuff and know-how. And they also touch a little bit in those courses on maybe where you can go to look for work, you know?
Well, I mean, there's obviously schools for, you know, production coordinating and filmmaking and everything. But for me, my experience was more in the work field. So with resources, I've actually met a lot of people just from networking as well. And being able to work on a lot of great projects just from meeting people in person. And I find sometimes when you meet people more in person, you have more of an intellectual conversation and they get a sense of your personality. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to just from meeting people and networking, working on great, amazing projects. So yeah, I don't know, be social, get out there, you know, sell yourself basically, because I'm a freelance. So that's kind of how I need to rely on my future.
It's always important. Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, just jumping off of what Melissa said, getting out there. So, you know, finding the community. But I think one of the most important things that you can do, one of the biggest things I've ever done for my own career is really stick to some mentors that I've found. You know, if you could find somebody that, you know, has done it before and that you appreciate and admire, it's always a good thing to have a mentor in your life. I act now as a mentor in many capacities, and I do it because I know how important it was for me. And a lot of my mentors are still a part of my life, even, you know, well into it, you know, into the the career I have right now. So it might not always be the easiest thing or seem like the easiest thing to do to find a mentor, but I think it starts by just reaching out, and you can do that. You can send, you can do some research online and send some emails out to people and ask questions, and relationships can be formed that way, on top of getting out there and going to see films or being a part of festivals or volunteering and doing things like that. So yeah, if you can find yourself a mentor, that's top notch in my books.
Yes, it is.
Lots of good stuff. I like it. We have specific questions around how to get a specific position in the industry, but I think that some of the suggestions that you just gave are helpful. So finding a mentor, making sure that you're networking and being a part of a community, reaching out, Googling, taking classes, all of these things are going to be supportive in sort of exploring your specific area of expertise or the area of expertise that you want to grow. So I would say find someone that's doing the work that you're doing, ask questions, all of that great stuff. But we did have one question, which is, would you recommend going to school as a part of, a strong start in your career? I feel like people are always a little bit half and half on this one.
Well, for me, I went to school for more technical, which is what I'm currently not doing.
Right.
and the cameras and the computers and the software that we were working in like 10 years ago is not even relevant now. So I mean, technology is constantly evolving. You kind of need to evolve with it. Yeah, for me, a lot of my experience and my knowledge with, working in the industry for like 8.5 years has been actually working in an office and on set of projects. To me, that's where you're going to get most of your knowledge, and where you can ask, your peers more questions if you decide you want to, pursue a specific role, behind the camera. Yeah, it's just that hands-on approach of actually being on set and working. I find you get the most experience and knowledge.
If I was to go back and do some things differently, I would still go to theater school, but I wouldn't wait so long to pursue an agent. I think doing those two things simultaneously is to your advantage. I think the sooner you start getting some of that practical experience under your belt, as far as film and television is concerned, the better. So you can still train, but go out for auditions at the same time. But in my opinion, I think it's essential that you get some sort of training. Yeah.
For the Mike and Jamie, both training school.
Yeah, I mean, that one's weird for me because I didn't go to post-secondary. I just started, because I started as an actor and I was doing TV. That was like, I always joke and say I went to high school twice in a row because I did Degrassi for 7 years after graduating high school. So my training was on set. I learned all of the roles and duties of filmmaking on set, and but I'm highly for training. Like I do believe in lifelong learning. I am like always enrolled in something. I'm always reading a book on how to do what I already am doing as a career. It just, because you can never know too much, and I'm always having these epiphanies. So I would say if you have the opportunity to go to school, to agree with what Jimmy says about like, don't let that stop you from going out and starting. That is so crucial because I do know people who went through film school and then get out of film school and are sort of expecting like a higher position job because they have the diploma, And then it's kind of like, okay, you're a PA now for the next 2 years. And they're like, I could have been doing this already, and I could have been working my way through. There is a working your way up the sort of a ladder, so to speak. So I think just go for it now. Just go for it now. And if you want to do school as well, do that. You can also get private training. You can just do online training, or you can just commit yourself to learning on site.
Okay, well, I mean, I took up all of your time, so I appreciate all of you sitting here with me and sharing for the last hour. Lots of great tidbits of information, of advice, of strategies, which I think is awesome. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to pass it back to Jess, I think, to close us off.
Thanks, Jay. I honestly can't say thank you enough for all of our panelists for being here for this past hour, and Jay, for you for facilitating that beautiful conversation. But mostly to our young creatives, for the past 3 days, they've been joining us for quite a few professional development sessions. We've looked at storytelling, we've looked at drones as a different form of technology, using mobile devices, since we're all kind of in this new unique time of being at home and social distancing. So I want to thank them and just everyone who's been a part of making this virtual summit such a success. It's been a joy putting it together and planning and connecting. It's been much bigger than I think any of us ever expected. So yeah, so a huge just thank you to everyone. And this conversation was wonderful. It was recorded. We will be sharing it with everyone following the summit. But that's kind of all I have to say.